The engagement hall shimmered with golden lights, and everyone believed Evan and Sophie were moments away from a perfect beginning. But that illusion cracked the instant Sophie lifted her glass and joked that she was marrying Evan for his money. Laughter died abruptly as conversations froze mid-sentence. Evan, trying to rescue the tension, smiled and tossed back a playful reply about having a prenup ready. The room exhaled a nervous chuckle, but Sophie didn't. Her face drained of color, her fingers trembling around the stem of her glass. For a split second, it felt as if someone had ripped away a curtain only she thought existed. She leaned in, voice tight, asking Evan what he meant, why he'd say something like that. And in that very moment, as shock flickered across her expression, everyone sensed the celebration was about to turn into something else entirely. When the guests finally returned to their conversations, Sophie pulled Evan aside with a force that surprised him. Her heels clicked sharply across the marble floor as she dragged him toward a quieter corner, far from the music and champagne. The moment they were alone, her voice rose, trembling with panic. She demanded to know why he would ever bring up a prenup, why he would humiliate her in front of everyone, why he would even consider something so offensive. Evan blinked, confused, explaining that it had been nothing more than a joke, a harmless response to her own comment about marrying him for money. But Sophie didn't hear him. Or maybe she didn't want to. Her breaths grew rapid, her eyes flashing with fear instead of frustration. She kept asking, again and again, if he had really made her sign something, if he had shown anything to his lawyer, if there was a document she didn't know about. Each question came out sharper than the last, and each one made her look more exposed. Evan tried to calm her, telling her there was no prenup, no contract, nothing at all. But her panic only deepened. She accused him of trying to trap her. She said he must have prepared it behind her back. She said this was proof he never trusted her from the beginning. Her voice cracked, not with sadness, but with a kind of desperation that unsettled him. If she knew there was no real document, why was she reacting like someone whose secret had been found out? Evan suddenly felt an unusual heaviness in his chest, a sense that something deeper was unraveling right in front of him. The way she clutched her bag, the way her eyes darted around as if afraid someone overheard them, the way she seemed more terrified of the idea of a prenup than hurt by his supposed lack of trust. It was as if the very concept threatened something she had planned far more carefully than he ever realized. She hissed that she couldn't marry someone who would dare question her intentions. He reminded her that she was the one who started the joke about marrying for money, but that only made her angrier. Her emotions spiraled as she accused him of trying to ruin everything. When he asked her what everything meant, she went quiet just long enough for him to notice. Then, with a sudden sweep of her hand, she declared the engagement over. No hesitation. No sadness. Just a frantic, almost defensive finality. She stormed out of the venue, leaving a trail of whispers and confused stares behind her. Evan stood frozen, surrounded by the distant hum of the party, trying to process what had happened. And for the first time, he felt a cold suspicion settle in. Her reaction hadn't been about love, trust, or pride. It had been about money, and the fear of losing access to it. Sophie didn't wait long before turning the breakup into a performance. Barely an hour after leaving the venue, she went live on her social media accounts, mascara smeared, voice trembling as if she were the victim of a cruel betrayal. She told thousands of viewers that Evan had emotionally manipulated her, pressured her into a prenup, and humiliated her in front of family and friends. Her tears flowed on cue, and her followers flooded the chat with sympathy, outrage, and demands for justice. She painted a picture of a controlling fiancé who valued money more than love, who blindsided her with legal documents, and who shattered her trust when she thought they were building a future together. It was dramatic. It was convincing. And most importantly, it was viral. Within hours, clips of her live stream spread across platforms, accompanied by hashtags, commentary videos, and angry posts targeting Evan. People who had never met him were calling him heartless, misogynistic, manipulative. Brands that had worked with Sophie reposted her statements as signs of solidarity. The internet had chosen its side. But it didn't stay that way for long. Mark, Evan's closest friend, had been recording parts of the engagement party for a small video montage he planned to gift the couple. He hadn't expected any of it to matter. But after seeing Sophie's live stream, he uploaded a short clip from earlier that night, Sophie laughing, glass in hand, boldly joking that she was marrying Evan for his money. Her tone wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't playful. It was almost proud. Then the clip showed Evan's calm, light-hearted response about a prenup, followed immediately by Sophie's stunned, terrified reaction. There was no pressure, no humiliation, no manipulation. Just her panic, just her guilt, just a moment that exposed her far more clearly than she ever intended. The internet flipped almost instantly. People who had defended her began deleting comments. Others stitched the videos together, pointing out how her story didn't add up. Some questioned why someone with pure intentions would react so violently to the idea of a prenup. Others speculated that she had plans that Evan's comment accidentally disrupted. Influencer forums picked up the story, dissecting Sophie's behavior with ruthless detail. Brands quietly removed her from their pages. Followers unfollowed in waves as her credibility collapsed. Her attempt to destroy Evan's reputation had backfired so quickly and so publicly that even her most loyal supporters struggled to defend her. Meanwhile, Evan remained silent, not out of guilt, but out of shock at how fast everything escalated. He hadn't intended to expose her, but the truth had exposed itself. And now, the world was seeing Sophie in a way she had never planned for them to see. The fallout from the viral video wasn't the end of Sophie's troubles. It was only the beginning. A few days later, Evan received a call from Emma, Sophie's former best friend, asking if he had seen the latest revelations. Curious and cautious, he agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe. Emma didn't waste time with small talk. She laid out a folder on the table and began showing Evan screenshots, messages, and photos from Sophie's private accounts. There were spreadsheets tracking Evan's assets, timelines for marriage and childbirth, and even detailed plans on how to secure her financial future through him. She had a Pinterest board titled My Financial Future, with pinned ideas for prenup negotiations, estate planning, and ways to maintain control over Evan's income. There were group chat logs with her friends discussing the 5-year plan to lock down Evan's finances and manipulate situations to her advantage. Emma revealed messages where Sophie had calculated the ideal time to have children to ensure legal rights and inheritance benefits. She had strategies for social media influence, engagement, and sponsorships all intertwined with her plan to leverage marriage for maximum gain. Evan listened in disbelief as Emma spoke, every word making his stomach turn. He realized that her reactions during the engagement party had never been about hurt feelings or shock. They were about fear of losing control over the financial strategy she had built. Emma even showed him a conversation with Sophie's parents, in which they expressed concern about her obsessive focus on money and warned her to rethink her priorities. When the parents discovered the full extent of the plan, they cut off her financial support immediately. It became clear that Sophie had meticulously crafted a life that revolved around Evan's wealth, masking ambition as love. Her panic at the mention of a prenup wasn't innocence. It was the fear of having her strategy exposed and jeopardized. Evan realized that the woman he thought he knew had an entirely different agenda. She had engineered her own version of a trophy wife lifestyle, complete with timelines, backup plans, and social strategies to maximize personal gain. Every detail of the engagement, from the public appearances to the private conversations, had been subtly calculated to serve her plan. Even her interactions with friends and family were strategic, aimed at creating a network that would support her vision. Evan's shock turned into clarity. He finally understood why everything had escalated so quickly. It wasn't just about a momentary lapse or a misunderstanding. It was about intention, careful preparation, and selfish ambition. Emma's revelations confirmed what Evan had suspected deep down during Sophie's outburst. Her focus was not on him or their relationship, but on the financial security she could extract from it. The discovery left Evan both relieved and resolute. Relieved that he had not unknowingly stepped into a trap, and resolute that he would not allow this manipulation to continue. Sophie's carefully constructed plan had been unveiled, leaving her exposed to the world, her family, and herself. Her intentions, once hidden behind charm and charisma, now lay bare for anyone to see. Evan walked away from that meeting with a clear mind, certain that his next steps would protect him and expose the truth fully. What had seemed like heartbreak turned into revelation, and revelation into empowerment. Sophie's initial shock soon transformed into anger, and anger quickly turned into a relentless desire for revenge. She tried reaching out to Evan multiple times, sending desperate messages, pleading for another chance, promising that she had changed. Each message was ignored, each call went unanswered. Her frustration grew with every rejection, fueling a dangerous determination to regain control. She started digging into Evan's past, looking for anyone who could corroborate a false story against him. She contacted his ex-girlfriends, attempting to persuade them to come forward with claims of deceit or betrayal. Many refused outright, but Sophie persisted, sending threats, emotional manipulation, and fabricated evidence. When that failed, she escalated further. She attempted to file a lawsuit claiming Evan had broken an implied promise of marriage, hoping to force him into a settlement. She prepared documents, hired an attorney, and even consulted forums for legal loopholes, thinking she could exploit technicalities to her advantage. Meanwhile, she began targeting his property, plotting small acts of sabotage, including tampering with his Tesla, hoping to intimidate him and create public scandal. Each action seemed carefully calculated, as if she had thought through every possible angle of revenge. But Evan was prepared. He had already engaged a competent lawyer who meticulously reviewed every move Sophie made. Every attempt at sabotage was anticipated and countered legally, leaving Sophie's plans ineffective. Her lawsuits were quickly dismissed due to lack of evidence and frivolous claims. Any accusations she tried to circulate online were met with solid proof, including recordings and witnesses that contradicted her story. Friends and colleagues, initially hesitant, began advising her to step back, warning her that continued attempts would only worsen her situation. Instead of deterring her, these warnings fueled Sophie's desperation further. She grew reckless, posting cryptic messages online hinting at revenge, attempting to rally sympathy, and trying to twist public perception again. But each move only drew more scrutiny. Mark and Evan's legal team documented everything meticulously, creating a detailed timeline of Sophie's actions. This record not only protected Evan, but also exposed her escalating behavior, demonstrating a pattern of harassment and malicious intent. Sophie's influence began to crumble under the weight of her own actions. The public that once supported her began questioning her motives, seeing a clear contrast between her earlier manipulations and Evan's calm, factual responses. By the end of the week, her attempts at retaliation had failed spectacularly. What was intended as a campaign to regain power turned into a self-inflicted public downfall. Her lawsuits, sabotage attempts, and harassment efforts had not only failed, but also strengthened Evan's position legally and socially. Sophie found herself isolated, her credibility in ruins, and her plans for revenge completely thwarted. The more she tried to reclaim control, the clearer it became to everyone watching that she was spiraling out of control. Her actions, once calculated, now seemed desperate and erratic, leaving no doubt that her attempts at revenge had backfired entirely. Sophie's life began to unravel completely, piece by piece, faster than she could control. Brands that had once lined up to work with her quickly severed ties, citing reputational risk and declining public trust. Sponsored posts disappeared from her social media accounts, and lucrative contracts she had counted on vanished overnight. Followers unfollowed in droves, leaving her platforms eerily silent compared to the once thriving engagement and lifestyle content she had built. Her social media clout, once her strongest asset, now became a glaring reminder of her fall. Without brand income, she turned to her parents for financial support, only to discover they had already cut her off after learning the full extent of her manipulations and schemes. She tried borrowing from friends, but many had distanced themselves after witnessing her increasingly erratic and aggressive attempts at revenge. Sophie's apartment, once furnished with designer taste and modern luxury, became a reminder of her dwindling resources as she struggled to pay rent and bills. Her car, a sleek Tesla that symbolized her success, was repossessed after she fell behind on payments, leaving her dependent on public transportation and rides from distant family members. She attempted to find freelance work, but her reputation preceded her, and employers were wary of hearing someone publicly associated with scandal. Even within her family, relationships strained. Distant relatives grew frustrated as she relied on them for temporary housing and small loans. She sought legal avenues to regain some footing, filing frivolous lawsuits against Evan, former associates, and even social media platforms, but each effort was dismissed swiftly. Her lawyer bills mounted, only adding to her financial burden and sense of helplessness. Sophie tried to revive her influencer career by creating new content, but the public response was lukewarm at best. Comments were critical, mocking, or simply indifferent, reflecting the permanent damage to her credibility. Even minor interactions on social media became battlegrounds, as former fans called out her manipulations and intentions during the engagement saga. Loneliness settled in as friends she had relied on for years withdrew, unwilling to be associated with her increasingly desperate antics. Her mental health began to suffer. Anxiety, stress, and self-doubt took hold, making everyday decisions feel overwhelming. Where she once felt in control of her future and finances, she now felt powerless, trapped in a spiral of her own making. The plans she had meticulously constructed to secure wealth, status, and influence had backfired, leaving her vulnerable and exposed. Each day became a reminder of the consequences of prioritizing ambition and greed over genuine relationships. Publicly and privately, Sophie was forced to confront the reality that her choices had destroyed her career, her reputation, and her support network. What remained of her life was a series of compromises: low-paying jobs, temporary housing, and strained family relations. The stark contrast between her previous life and the one she now navigated was impossible to ignore. Every attempt to claw back her former status only highlighted how far she had fallen. Sophie had become a living example of the cost of unchecked ambition and material obsession. Her once bright future was now shadowed by the consequences of decisions driven by greed rather than integrity. She had lost not only money and possessions, but also respect, trust, and meaningful connections, leaving her to face a harsh reality of isolation and downfall. Evan slowly began to rebuild his life after the whirlwind of betrayal and public scandal. He focused on clearing his name, allowing the evidence collected by friends and legal counsel to speak for itself. The court proceedings regarding the engagement ring and Sophie's frivolous lawsuits were resolved swiftly in his favor, reaffirming his reputation and integrity. He reclaimed the engagement ring, a small but meaningful symbol of moving past the toxic situation and regaining control of his life. Evan also chose to engage in philanthropic work, partnering with his former fiancé's father on a financial education fund for young adults, channeling his experiences into helping others avoid similar pitfalls. His involvement in the fund brought a sense of purpose and fulfillment, replacing the stress and chaos Sophie had caused. As weeks turned into months, Evan focused on personal growth, both emotionally and professionally. He strengthened relationships with friends who had supported him throughout the ordeal, realizing which bonds were genuine and worth nurturing. Socially, he began to rebuild trust carefully, learning to distinguish between those motivated by authenticity and those driven by self-interest. Evan also prioritized his emotional well-being, seeking therapy and guidance to process the trauma of betrayal and public shamming. He took time for reflection, understanding the warning signs he had previously overlooked and committing to more mindful choices in relationships. It wasn't long before Evan met Dr. Olivia Hart, a pediatric surgeon with a sharp mind, kind heart, and impressive independence. Olivia's confidence and self-sufficiency resonated with him, offering a refreshing contrast to Sophie's manipulative and materialistic behavior. Their relationship developed slowly, grounded in mutual respect, shared values, and clear communication. Evan was careful not to repeat past mistakes, valuing transparency and emotional honesty above appearances or wealth. Olivia admired Evan's resilience and integrity, and together, they built a partnership based on trust rather than strategic advantage. Professionally, Evan's career also benefited from the calm and focus he regained after the ordeal. He became more decisive, confident, and respected in his field, earning promotions and new opportunities that aligned with his ambitions. The combination of personal growth, stable relationships, and professional success created a life balance he had never experienced before Sophie's manipulations. He found satisfaction not in material gain, but in meaningful achievements and authentic connections. Evan's public image shifted positively as well, with the narrative of his story now emphasizing resilience, integrity, and triumph over deception. People began to respect him not just for his success, but for the way he navigated adversity with dignity. Meanwhile, Sophie's downfall served as a cautionary tale, highlighting the consequences of greed and manipulative ambition, further emphasizing Evan's stability and careful judgment. Evan's life became a testament to recovery, showing that even after betrayal, one can find fulfillment, love, and balance when integrity guides decisions. He embraced this new chapter fully, understanding the value of patience, careful judgment, and the importance of surrounding himself with genuine, trustworthy people. Through these experiences, Evan transformed adversity into strength, emerging wiser, happier, and more centered than ever before. His story concluded not with bitterness, but with growth, love, and a renewed sense of purpose that Sophie's schemes could never have taken away. In the end, the chaos and betrayal that Sophie had orchestrated came full circle. Her schemes, carefully planned and executed, had collapsed under the weight of truth and consequence. She lost not only her wealth and career, but also her credibility, friendships, and family support. Every attempt to manipulate or retaliate only deepened her isolation and public scrutiny. Meanwhile, Evan emerged stronger, wiser, and more self-aware than before. The ordeal had tested his patience, judgment, and resilience, but he had navigated it with integrity and calm. He reclaimed his life, rebuilt his reputation, and discovered a love grounded in respect, honesty, and mutual support with Olivia. The contrast between his recovery and Sophie's downfall highlighted the dangers of greed and selfish ambition. Ultimately, the story served as a clear reminder that placing material gain above genuine human connection leads only to ruin. Evan's triumph was not just about winning back control, but about finding balance, authenticity, and lasting happiness. He proved that when faced with deceit, integrity, patience, and truth, could guide one toward a life of fulfillment. Sophie's choices had destroyed her future, while Evan's wisdom and composure had opened the door to a brighter, more meaningful path. In the end, the lesson was simple. Ambition without conscience destroys, but integrity and care build lasting success and happiness.